So, Josh, I know we talk a lot about medication and supplements, and though those have a profound role in treating someone's health and trying to promote longevity, I think some low hanging fruit and actually much more important things are just training and somebody's exercise capacity, both strength and endurance. Personally, I feel like these are, 100, if not 200, 300 times more important than any medication or supplement that is. And that even includes things like rapamycin, which we know are amazing for longevity. Nothing will beat having strength and having a high VO2 max. And so, as somebody who has been in the space for a long time, who has a kinesiology background and also a personal trainer and has worked with thousands of clients, what would your prescription be for somebody who doesn't necessarily want to be a massive bodybuilder, completely jacked, Instagram influencer, what have you, but is just looking to promote health, longevity, and potentially look a little bit better naked?
No, absolutely. And I love your point that at the end of the day, I feel like your exercise and activity level is really going to be the first thing you need to address when you want to do any lifestyle shift before any supplements, things of that nature. Especially as you look at the aging process, keeping resistance training in, is going to help reduce, events of possible osteoporosis for women as they get older, sarcopenia, where you're losing muscle through the aging process. And obviously, any type of cardiovascular training is going to keep your ticker working at a much more efficient rate. So, if you think about it along those lines, it simply is going to at least help your chances of living a longer, healthier life. As far as a prescription for what I think most people should follow, I think sometimes it gets overcomplicated, and everyone thinks that they need to be hitting every single body part. As far as resistance training goes, 5 times a week, like you see a lot of bodybuilders do. And actually, I think for the average person, it's just the opposite, and you get much more bang for your buck, probably from 2 to 3 full body style sessions. And even a lot of the studies point to you're going to get more results out of that anyway, because you're not just hammering one body part and making your legs so sore that you can't walk for the rest of the week. Maybe hitting a couple movements of each body part 2 to 3 times a week is going to actually obviously break down the muscle and help you to rebuild and get stronger, but not so much to where you can't go back in and do it the next week or the next day. And I feel like that's a little easier to adhere to for most people. It's a little more exciting to get to touch up on a bit of everything. And then obviously you want to make sure that you are having some cardiovascular work in there as well. At Merrick Health, where Dr. Hotchkiss and I both work, we recommend 4 times a week of 45 minutes of zone 2 training. And essentially what zone 2 training is, without getting into the weeds, is really working your aerobic capacity, or really where you're burning the most fat per se. And what I normally tell people is to kind of know that you're at zone 2 training is you want it to be a state of cardio or a state of exertion where if I was sitting next to you, you could hold a conversation with me. It wouldn't be fun. It might feel a little strained, but you still could carry on with me in conversation if you needed to. And if you're doing that about 3 to 4 times a week, it's also maybe good to throw in a 10 to 15 minute bout of high intensity exercise. So where you're, really maybe working on sprints, or, whether that's sprints on a rower, an erg bike, whatever it may be, just kind of work that top end and try and increase your VO2 max. So you're working both levels of your cardiovascular fitness.
Perfect. Awesome. And I think that when it comes to weight training, most of us we pretty much understand at this point. And most people really enjoy weight training, especially younger individuals. Again, for the most part, it's a generalization. But I think where a lot of us struggle is, where do we start when it comes to cardio? So I know you brought up two various ones: the zone 2 and then the higher aerobic work, something more high intense. So where would you start? Where would a guy who has just been lifting for the past few years and really neglecting cardio, but they want to start focusing on longevity, where would you start? How many times a week? Would you just go right out the bat doing that 4 times a week? Would you start slower? And then what modalities do you think? Running, stairs, bike, does it matter?
Yeah, and great question. Because I think a lot of people, when they think of cardio, they just think I need to go run. And I know that, you and I have talked about, I'm a long distance runner, but I think for most people, that's maybe not the best modality to start out with, just because if you look at all the cardiovascular activities, running's certainly going to be the most high impact, especially if you're weight training on top of it. So I like for people to really kind of find one, the modality that they like the most. That could either be swimming, biking, the stairs, walking on a treadmill incline, keeping your hands off of the machine, really, or that can just be simply walking around your neighborhood. But I think starting with maybe 3 times a week in that zone two for 45 minutes, again, wanting to keep it at a pace to where if I was standing there next to you, we could carry on a conversation, is a great place to start. Once you feel like you are, comfortable and good with that, you can always increase it to 4 times a week. And then possibly on one of those days, maybe add in at the end of your session, a 10 to 15-minute bout where you're working more of your anaerobic level, which is going to be without oxygen, where necessarily we probably couldn't talk, where you're like working on your high intensity stuff, whether that's, increasing the amount of steps per minute on the stair mill to where you really feel like you're getting after it, or, working on hard sprints on the row or whatever that may be.
And then another question, 3 to 4 days of 45 minutes at a time, on top of also trying to get in resistance training and on top of all the other duties of life, dealing with kids, your family, your work. How am I going to fit that all in? And does it need to be all at one time, that 45 minutes, or could I break that up throughout the day?
Great question. And, for all of these recommendations, this is always in a perfect world, right? If we could all get 3 to 4 sessions, 2 to 3 resistance training settings in a week. What I tell everybody is to not necessarily stress over it. As long as you are getting in some during the week, that is a good place to start. So maybe if that's even 2 to 3 days a week of your endurance zone two training and 2 days lifting. If you can get yourself into a habit of doing that for 2 to 3 months, and then you feel like you've got that down, it works with your schedule, maybe add in an extra session of each. But don't necessarily just stress yourself out over having to hit a specific number. I certainly don't think you have to do them both at once. For me, and cardio, I think for most people, is normally a great morning exercise as far as just getting yourself going. And again, that can be simply just getting up and walking around the neighborhood with your animals or whatever it may be, just to kind of get your day started that way, possibly in a fasted setting. And then in the afternoon, maybe throwing in your lifting or whatever necessarily works for your schedule. You certainly can throw them in both together if you were going to. I always recommend starting with resistance training and then finishing with the cardiovascular work at the end, rather than starting with your cardio work and then going into your resistance training.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm somebody who's extremely busy. My calendar is pretty much booked from the time that I wake up to when I go to sleep. And so I'm definitely sympathetic to people who have those worries and complaints as well. One thing that I found is that I will just break it up throughout the day. And maybe that's not ideal. Maybe it would be better to do about a 45 minutes. But in my opinion, if I can do 3 10-minute sessions, cumulatively, I'm getting a half hour. Again, it might not be superior, but it's better than nothing. So what I found is I think most of us have a few 10-minute breaks throughout the day, and it's usually enough to do something somewhat cardiovascularly oriented. What I would do when I was hospital based, say in like residency, if I would get that break, I might just walk around the hospital a few times at a fast pace, or I would walk up and down stairs. Of course, people look at you a little weird sometimes, but you got to do what you got to do. And I'll continue to do that now that I'm office based here at home working with Merrick patients a lot. I will go outside and take a loop. Sometimes I do a little bit of a jog around the building, take my dog out. He loves it too. So a few of those just cumulatively definitely add up. So that would be one of my recommendations to people who are feeling like that's daunting when you see the levels, because I hear that a lot from your average person, that I don't have 45 minutes a day to dedicate to just cardio. And then you want me to meditate, and then you want me to sauna, and then you want me to cold plunge, and then you want me to eat this way. And I'm like, yeah, I know if we did everything the way that, the biohackers would say we would, you wouldn't get a damn thing done in a day. You'd wake up and then you'd do all of your biohacking routines until like 2 p.m. and nothing would get done. So I think there are ways to be able to benefit your health, but also fit it into a normal life.
Absolutely. And to end on Dr. Hotchkiss's point there, as I was saying earlier, it's nothing that you ever need to stress about if you're not hitting that perfect amount that we, prescribe to patients at Merrick, or, what the studies support. As long as you are doing something, in my book, that's a win. If you're doing 4 times a week at 30 minutes and that's all you have time for, I promise that, you're definitely reaping some benefit there. It's not like you're just getting nothing out of it.